Hello everyone. This lecture supplements Chapter 5 of the textbook, which covers scope and the work breakdown structure. Scope focuses on the question of what needs to be done. The what is the scope of the project. A clear definition of scope is needed in terms of what is included and, as importantly, what is not included, so that the right expectations can be set for all the project stakeholders. Work breakdown structure is the approach for breaking down the project scope into smaller work packages, and the smaller work packages are easier to plan and easier to estimate in terms of their duration and their cost. After completing the activities this week, you should be able to understand the relationship among scope, schedule, and budget. Apply tools for defining and managing the scope of a project. Differentiate between project scope and product scope. Differentiate between a deliverable and a milestone. Be able to develop a work breakdown structure, WBS, and describe and apply several project estimation methods. Project scope establishes what needs to be done to achieve the project's measurable organizational value, MOV. It also establishes what will not be done by the project. The scope sets the expectations of the stakeholders and is the basis for everything that gets planned and eventually gets executed on the project. A project is in balance or in harmony when the project budget and schedule are developed based on the project scope. The dependency among scope, schedule, and budget is called triple constraint. A project becomes imbalanced when scope increases or decreases without adjusting the schedule or budget accordingly. Another aspect of the project that impacts the project budget and schedule is quality, meaning that quality along with the scope should be considered for development of budget and schedule. Therefore, many consider scope, quality, budget, and schedule as quadruple constraints. Ed Jordan, a famous software engineer, famously called projects whose scope, schedule, and budget are significantly imbalanced, called them death march projects. For example, if the schedule is reduced to less than 50% of its originally estimated schedule, it's very likely that that project will fail. The term scope is used to define the work boundaries and deliverables of a project. So what needs to get done gets done. And only what needs to get done gets done. No more, no less. Scope management consists of these 6 processes. Scope planning is planning and aggregation of all the other 5 scope management processes into the project scope management plan. The scope management plan defines the project scope and how it will be verified and controlled throughout the project. Collect requirements process involves engaging customers or users in order to define their needs. Scope definition process results in detailed scope statement that defines what work will be done and what work will not be part of the project. And it will serve as the basis for all future project decisions. In create work breakdown structure, the major project deliverables are decomposed or divided into smaller and more manageable work packages. In scope verification process, it is confirmed that the project scope is accurate, complete, and supports the project's MOV. Upon confirmation, the scope is formally accepted. Scope change control process ensures that the controls are in place to manage any proposed scope changes once the project scope is set. These procedures must be communicated and understood by all project stakeholders. Scope statement is the output of the defined scope process. It's the document that identifies the overall requirements of the project based on detailed capturing and documenting the project sponsors and other major stakeholders' needs and expectations. On this slide, you see an example of a scope statement. Develop a telehealth strategy for the hospital. Also, develop, buy, or subscribe, so it's not mandating one approach for an application that supports all of the processes, products, and services identified in the telehealth strategy. And then lastly, the application needs to integrate with the hospital's existing EHR system. Product scope therefore focuses on identifying the features and functionality of the information system to be implemented. On the other hand, the project scope statement identifies the deliverables of the project. Deliverable structure chart is a good visual tool for identifying and communicating a project-oriented deliverables. This is an example of a deliverable structure chart which lists all the project deliverables in the project lifecycle and in the system development lifecycle phases. The purpose of DSC is to define all of the project-oriented deliverables to be provided by the project team. Each deliverable should have a clear purpose, and each phase should produce at least one deliverable. The use case diagram provides a simple yet very effective overview of the functions and interactions between the use cases and the actors. In this example, you see the external users on the left and internal users on the right, and functions or use cases in the middle. All major functionality available to a particular actor or particular user can be easily seen on the use case diagram. A statement of work, or SOW, is a description of the product, service, or information system to be delivered by the project. Its purpose is based upon whether the project will be done with internal or external resources to the organization. For internal projects, the SOW should tie together the business need with the specific requirements or expectations of the project. For external projects, an organization would create a SOW that includes specifications, quantities, quality standards, or performance requirements for inclusion in a document such as request for proposal, RFP, or request for information, RFI, or request for bid, RFB. As I mentioned earlier, it is also important to indicate what is not included in the scope. For example, the assessment of the as-is state of technology or organization, or the data mining features in this example that are excluded from the scope. The project scope must be verified by stakeholders to ensure that the deliverables are completed and documented to the quality standards that were required. The purpose of scope change control procedures is to determine that any change to the project scope is beneficial to the project by assessing the impact of that change on cost and schedule. There are several scope changes that can occur. Scope growth usually occurs in early stages of the project when the project team and the project sponsor have trouble understanding what the project is supposed to accomplish. Scope creep refers to adding seemingly small yet time-consuming and resource-consuming features to the system after the scope of the project has been approved. Scope leap is a fundamental and a significant change in the project scope. The most important benefit of scope change control procedures is that they keep the project manager in control of the project. More specifically, they allow the project manager to manage and control the project schedule and budget. Scope control procedures also allow the project team to stay focused and on track in terms of meeting its milestones because it does not have to perform unnecessary work. Change request form is used to evaluate each change request individually and decide whether or not it should be accepted or rejected. Change request log is a list of all change requests and their status. It prevents requests from falling through cracks, leading to impacting the credibility of the project team. This is an example of a change request form which has these elements. It has to have a description of the change request so that the project manager and the project team fully understands the scope change. Also the justification for why the scope change is needed. Several alternatives may be proposed and analyzed with the impact on the scope, schedule, resources, and cost. A recommendation from the project team on the alternative to be selected, and an approval of the scope changes either to be implemented or rejected. Change request log keeps a list of the change requests and their status. Most organizations use online tools such as Jira for electronic change request and approval process. Now let's talk about work breakdown structure, which is a very effective approach for planning projects by focusing on deliverables. Work breakdown structure, or WBS, determines how the deliverables of the project can be completed. In this process, all the work is broken down into smaller tasks or work packages. Having the detailed tasks help us to more accurately estimate the project schedule and cost. The PMBOK definition is that WBS represents a logical decomposition of the work to be performed and focuses on how the product, service, or results is naturally subdivided. It's an outline of what work is to be performed. This slide depicts how a project is broken down into phases. For each phase, one or more deliverables are identified, and the phase will have at least one milestone to signify its completion. Work packages are logical groups of activities required for completing a project deliverable. Work packages, in turn, will be the basis for estimating time and resources required to complete each work package. By aggregating the estimates for each work package, we will be able to estimate the overall project schedule and budget. Work packages provide a logical basis for defining the project activities and assigning resources to those activities so that all of the project work is identified. A milestone is a significant event or achievement that provides evidence that a delivery has been completed or the phase is formally over. So why do we include the milestones in WBS? Milestones serves as road posts for project team to know if they are on schedule or if they are behind, so they can keep the project team focused. We can reduce risk by including milestones for proof of concepts or pilots in a project. Milestones can also identify quality checkpoints or gates. Deliverables and milestones are closely related, but they are not the same thing. The deliverables are tangible work products such as presentations, reports, plans, prototypes, and final application system. A milestone, on the other hand, is a significant event or achievement. For example, a deliverable may be a prototype of the user interface, but the milestone would be a stakeholder's formal acceptance of the user interface. To better understand the differentiation between milestone and deliverable, let's look at an example on how we break down the logical activities required for a deliverable to complete the test results report. For completing the report, we need to review the test plans with the client and get their input, carry out the tests, analyze the results, and summarize the results in a report and a presentation to the client. Assuming everything goes well, we get client sign-off. In this example, the test report is a deliverable, and the acceptance by client is a milestone. For developing the work breakdown structure, we develop work packages for deliverables that are defined in the deliverable structure chart. When we are developing the WBS, we need to keep in mind that the WBS should include only tasks or activities that are required for the delivery of project's deliverables as defined in the project scope. In turn, this ensures that the project activities will be focused on achieving project's MOV. Milestones can also be used to reduce risk by including proof of concepts or pilots as deliverables. A proof of concept can be the testing of an idea, concept, or technology that is critical to project success. The level of detail should support planning and control. The WBS provides a bridge between the project scope and project schedule and budget. Therefore, the level of detail should support not only the development of project plan, but also allow the project manager and project team to monitor and compare the project's actual progress to the original project schedule and budget. The rule of thumb is each work package should not be more than 2 weeks to complete. One way to ensure that WBS has the appropriate level of detail is to ensure that people who do the work are involved in the development of WBS. A person who has experience and expertise in a particular area probably has a better feel for what activities need to be performed in order to produce a particular project deliverable. Although the project manager is responsible for ensuring that a realistic WBS is developed, the people who must carry out the activities and tasks may be more committed to the plan if they are actually involved in its development. After we have the WBS, we need to estimate the cost and time associated with each task or deliverable. There are a number of estimating techniques, so let's examine each of these techniques. Guesstimate is guessing or just picking numbers out of the air and is not the best way to develop a project schedule or budget. Unfortunately, many inexperienced project managers tend to use this technique because it's easy and it's quick. The problem is that guessing at estimates is usually not accurate. In fact, the root of many major software disasters can be traced to hasty scheduling, irrational commitments, and of unprofessional estimating techniques. Once a project blindly launches forward toward an impossible set of goals, the rest of the disaster will occur almost inevitably. The Delphi technique in general involves multiple experts who arrive at a consensus on a particular subject or issue. Although the Delphi technique is generally used for group decision making, it can be a useful tool for estimating. To estimate using the Delphi technique, several experts need to be recruited to estimate the same item based on information supplied. Each expert makes an estimate and then all the results are compared. If the estimates are reasonably close, they can be averaged and used as an estimate. Otherwise, the differences in estimates are discussed by experts and then they make adjustments or another estimate. In general, these rounds are anonymous and several rounds may take place until a consensus is reached. Not surprisingly, using the Delphi technique can take longer and cost more than most estimating methods, but it can be very effective and provide reasonable assurance when the tasks are high and the margin for error is low. Time boxing is often used on agile projects, whereby a box of time is allocated for a sprint. However, this technique can also be used for a specific activity, task, or any component of the WBS. This allocation is based more on requirements than just a guesswork. For example, a project team may have 2 and only 2 weeks to build a prototype during a sprint. At the end of the 2 weeks, work on the prototype stops, regardless of whether the prototype is 100% complete or not. Used effectively, time boxing can help focus the project team's effort on an important and critical task. Let me share with you an example of time boxing that I used in 2003 sequestration, when the federal government budget was significantly cut. My organization at the time was in the middle of developing the next generation case management system for our probation officers. After recognizing the dire budget prospect, I time boxed the release of the first version of the new system by the end of that fiscal year, before the budget cut hits our books. The project team worked with users and reduced requirements only to those critical features. We were able to complete the initial release in that fiscal year because of that time boxing approach. Experience with similar projects in the past will be valuable both in top-down as well as bottom-up estimating. The top-down estimating involves estimating the schedule and/or cost of the entire project in terms of how long it should take or how much it should cost. Top-down estimating often results from a mandate made by upper management. Usually, the schedule and/or cost estimate is a product of some strategic plan or because someone thinks it should take a certain amount of time or cost a particular amount. On the other hand, top-down estimating could be a reaction to the business environment. It is important to keep in mind the top-down estimating works well when the budget objectives are reasonable, realistic, and achievable. Bottom-up estimating is the most common estimating technique. The work breakdown structure provides the basis for bottom-up estimating because all of the project phases and activities are defined. Bottom-up estimating involves estimating the time and effort in terms of person hours, person weeks, or person months, as well as other resources required for each activity. The project team can provide reasonable time estimates for each activity. Then time and costs are rolled up for each deliverable, and the whole schedule is put together. In short, bottom-up estimating starts with WBS and then produces the project's target, schedule, and budget. This concludes my lecture that supplements Chapter 5 of the textbook. Thank you for your attention.